I was hooked up to an IV when the nurse told me my insurance had just denied coverage. Not pending review, not under investigation, denied. As in, the company I'd paid $1,700 a month to for the last 9 years had decided, right there, mid-chemotherapy, that I was no longer their problem. The room went quiet, except for the steady drip of the machine pumping poison into my veins to kill the cancer trying to kill me. I remember staring at the fluid bag, watching it pulse, thinking this had to be some kind of mistake, some clerical error. But the nurse's face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. My name is David Brennan, 42 years old. I ran a small architecture firm in Portland for the better part of 15 years. Good life, good income. I did everything right. I bought the premium plan from Vanguard Health Solutions because I wanted the best. Because I believed that if something ever went wrong, I'd be protected. That's what insurance is supposed to be, right? Protection. 3 months earlier, I'd felt a lump under my arm. Small thing. Probably nothing. But my wife Lauren insisted I get it checked. 2 weeks later, I was sitting across from Dr. Patel, listening to him say the word lymphoma, like it was just another Tuesday. Stage 3. Aggressive. Treatable. But we needed to move fast. I called Vanguard that same afternoon. The rep, some guy named Kyle with a voice like a customer service robot, assured me everything would be covered. You're in excellent hands, Mr. Brennan. Your platinum plan covers oncology treatment at 90% after deductible. You made a smart choice with Vanguard. Smart choice. I held on to those words like a lifeline. The first round of chemo hit me like a freight train. I've never felt anything like it. It wasn't just being sick. It was being hollowed out from the inside. But I kept showing up. Every session. Every scan. Every blood draw. Because the alternative wasn't an option. I had Lauren. I had our daughter, Emma, who was 13 and terrified every time she looked at me. I had a life I wasn't ready to leave. By round 4, the bills started coming. $50,000, $80,000, then $112,000. But Vanguard kept approving the claims. Processing, the portal said. Under review. I trusted the system. I trusted that the company I'd been loyal to for nearly a decade wouldn't just abandon me when I needed them most. I was wrong. The denial letter came on a Thursday. I was too weak to read it myself, so Lauren opened it at the kitchen table while I lay on the couch, trying not to vomit. I heard her voice crack. Just this small, broken sound. Then silence. They're saying it's a pre-existing condition, she finally said. I sat up, even though the room spun. What? They're claiming you had an undiagnosed lymphatic abnormality 18 months ago, during your routine physical. They say you didn't disclose it. I didn't have anything 18 months ago. Patel said I was fine. The blood work was clean. They're saying there was an elevated white blood cell count that you failed to report. Elevated. By 0.3%. Something Dr. Patel had literally waved off as completely normal variance. I didn't even remember him mentioning it. But Vanguard had gone back through every page of my medical records, found that one number, and built an entire case around it. A case that said I'd knowingly hidden a pre-existing condition to get coverage. They weren't just denying future treatment. They were retroactively canceling everything. Every scan, every IV bag, every hour in that chair. They wanted it all back. $347,000. Due in 90 days. Lauren's hands were shaking when she put the letter down. We can fight this. But I already knew. I'd heard the stories. I'd seen the news segments about people who spent years battling insurance companies, draining their savings, losing their homes, all while their diseases progressed. The system wasn't designed for patients to win. It was designed to make winning so expensive, so exhausting, that you'd just give up and die quietly. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the nausea or the pain, because of the rage. This white-hot, bone-deep fury that I'd never felt before in my life. I'd played by every rule. I'd paid every premium on time. I'd been a model policyholder. And the second I actually needed them, they'd found a loophole and pulled the ripcord. The next morning, I called Vanguard. I wanted to speak to someone, anyone, who could explain how this was possible. I got transferred 6 times. Finally, I landed with a claims supervisor named Brenda Cortez. Her voice had that practiced sympathy, the kind that's designed to sound human without actually being human. I understand your frustration, Mr. Brennan, but the decision has been reviewed by our medical board and found to be consistent with your policy terms. I don't have a pre-existing condition. This is a lie. Our records indicate your records are wrong. Mr. Brennan, I'm not able to override a medical board decision. If you'd like to file an appeal. How long does an appeal take? Pause. Typically, 6 to 8 months. I didn't have 6 to 8 months. Dr. Patel had been very clear. Stop treatment now, and I'd be dead by Christmas. There has to be someone I can talk to. Someone who can actually look at this. You can submit a written appeal to our review department, but I have to be honest with you. The approval rate for overturned denials in cases like yours is less than 4%. 4%. She said it like she was reading the weather. I hung up. My hands were numb. Lauren was watching me from the doorway, and I saw the same thing in her eyes that I felt in my chest. We were alone in this. Completely, terrifyingly alone. The hospital gave me 2 weeks to figure out payment. After that, they'd have to stop treatment. Not because they wanted to, Dr. Patel made that very clear, but because they couldn't carry that kind of liability. $300,000 and climbing. Without insurance, I was just another uninsured patient they couldn't afford to save. Lauren started calling lawyers. Most of them said the same thing. Insurance litigation could take years, and even if we won, the legal fees would eat up any settlement. One attorney was blunt enough to say, "You'd be better off declaring bankruptcy and paying out of pocket for treatment. At least you'd survive." Survive. And that word kept echoing in my head. Not thrive. Not live. Just survive. I started looking into the cost of continuing treatment without coverage. Each chemo session, $12,000. Scans, $8,000. Medications, $4,000 a month. I did the math on our savings, our retirement accounts, the equity in our house. Even if we liquidated everything, we'd run out of money before we ran out of cancer. That's when I started researching Vanguard Health Solutions. Really researching. Not just the glossy website with the stock photos of smiling families. I wanted to know who was making these decisions. Who had looked at my file and decided I was worth more dead than alive. What I found made my blood run cold. Vanguard wasn't some struggling company trying to stay afloat. They'd posted record profits last quarter, on $6.2 billion. Their CEO, Richard Hastings, had taken home a $43 million compensation package. The company's stock had split twice in the last 3 years. And their denial rate? Industry analysts estimated it at 38%. Nearly 4 out of 10 claims rejected. Not because they were fraudulent, but because Vanguard had pioneered something they called algorithmic claims review. Basically, an AI that scanned patient records looking for any possible reason, no matter how small, to deny coverage. That elevated white blood cell count? The AI had flagged it. Not a human doctor. Not someone who understood context or nuance. A program designed to find reasons to say no. I found online forums. Hundreds of people with stories like mine. Or a woman in Ohio whose coverage was denied during her daughter's leukemia treatment because of an undisclosed family history. Her grandmother had died of cancer in the 1970s. A man in Texas who lost everything fighting Vanguard over a heart surgery they claimed was elective. A father in Michigan whose son died because Vanguard delayed approval for a transplant until it was too late. The pattern was obvious. Deny first, delay second. Let the patient run out of time or money, then settle for pennies on the dollar if they somehow survived long enough to sue. But here's what really got me. Vanguard had a department. An actual team of people whose job was to identify high-cost patients and find policy violations. They called it the Cost Containment Division. Internally, employees called it something else, the Death Panel. I found a whistleblower article from 2 years ago. A former Vanguard claims adjuster named Patricia Reeves had gone public, saying the company had quotas. Actual quotas for denials. If you didn't hit your target, you got written up. She'd been fired for approving too many expensive claims. The article had barely made a ripple. A few thousand shares. Some angry comments. Then nothing. Because that's how it works. The system protects itself. I spent 3 days down that rabbit hole, reading everything I could find. Lauren kept telling me to rest, to focus on getting better. But I couldn't. Because I'd realized something. This wasn't personal. Vanguard didn't hate me specifically. I was just a number on a spreadsheet, a line item to be erased, and that made it so much worse. On day 4, I got the second letter. This one wasn't from the claims department. It was from Vanguard's legal team. They were formally demanding repayment of the $347,000 within 60 days. If I failed to comply, they'd pursue all available legal remedies, including liens against our property and garnishment of wages. They were going to take our house, the home where Emma had grown up, where Lauren and I had built our life. I sat in my office, staring at that letter, and something inside me shifted. The fear was still there, the exhaustion, the constant grinding nausea from the chemo. But underneath all of that, something else was growing. I wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. I called Patricia Reeves, tracked her down through LinkedIn, and sent her a message explaining my situation. She responded within an hour. "Well, I'm sorry this is happening to you," she wrote, "but I'm not surprised. Vanguard does this to thousands of people every year. The system is designed to break you before you can fight back." We talked on the phone that night. She told me things that weren't in any article. How the Cost Containment Division had access to predictive analytics that calculated the probability of a patient suing versus just paying. How they specifically targeted middle-class patients, people with just enough assets to drain, but not enough resources to wage a prolonged legal battle. They gamble that you'll either die, go bankrupt, or give up, Patricia said. And 97% of the time, they're right. What about the other 3%? Those are the ones who find a way to hurt them back. I asked her what she meant. She was quiet for a long moment. "David, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you this. Vanguard's entire business model depends on opacity. They count on patients not understanding how the system works, not knowing who to call, not realizing that every claim denial is reviewed by real people, making real decisions based on real metrics. If you can expose how those decisions are made, that's when things get interesting." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time thinking. Then I opened my laptop and started digging deeper. Vanguard was a publicly traded company, which meant they had to disclose certain information. I pulled their quarterly earnings reports, their shareholder meeting minutes, their SEC filings. Buried in the footnotes of their 10K, I found something. Vanguard had set aside $470 million for claims litigation reserves. $470 million. That's how much they expected to pay out in lawsuits and settlements. It was built into their budget, factored into their profit margins. Denying claims wasn't a bug. It was the entire business model. I started mapping it out. Who made the decisions? how the chain of command worked. The Cost Containment Division reported to someone named Gregory Walsh, VP of Medical Operations. Walsh reported directly to the CFO, Martin Chen, and Chen answered to Richard Hastings. 3 men, 3 people who, directly or indirectly, had decided I wasn't worth saving. I wanted names. I wanted faces. I wanted to know who these people were when they went home at night. Did they have families? Did they tell their kids what they did for a living? Did they sleep well, knowing they'd condemned thousands of people to financial ruin or death? That's when I found the lawsuit. Not against Vanguard, against Gregory Walsh personally. A wrongful death suit filed by a man named Robert Chen, no relation to the CFO, whose wife had died after Vanguard denied coverage for an experimental treatment. The suit alleged that Walsh had personally intervened to deny the claim, overruling 3 separate medical reviewers who'd recommended approval. The case had been settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Sealed records, confidentiality agreement, another story buried before it could make noise. But I had a name now, and names have power. I hired a private investigator. Cost me $3,000 I didn't have, but I needed information. I needed to understand who I was up against. What came back was illuminating. Gregory Walsh, 56 years old, lived in a gated community in Scottsdale. 3 kids, all adults now. 2 ex-wives, member of an exclusive country club, drove a Tesla Model X, on the board of a local charter school. From the outside, he looked like any successful executive. But the PI dug deeper and found something interesting. Walsh had a gambling problem, regular trips to Vegas, losses in the 6 figures over the past 2 years. He'd refinanced his house twice. A man under pressure makes mistakes. I also looked into Richard Hastings. The CEO was cleaner, at least on the surface, but he was ambitious. Word in industry circles was that he was positioning Vanguard for a major acquisition. Some speculation about a merger with a larger healthcare conglomerate. His entire legacy depended on Vanguard's stock price staying strong. Bad press could tank that, especially if it hit at the right time. There was a point where I almost didn't tell this story at all. My own mother said no one would listen, that I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers telling stories like this. But sitting here now, I know stories like this matter. Some pain deserves to be heard. Because I realized something in those dark weeks. I wasn't just fighting for my life anymore. I was fighting for everyone who'd been crushed by this system and didn't have the strength left to fight back. And I had a plan. The first thing I did was document everything. Every phone call with Vanguard, recorded. Every letter, scanned and saved. Every email, backed up to 3 different cloud services. I created a timeline of every interaction, every denial, every transfer to another department. I built a case file that would make a federal prosecutor jealous. Then I started reaching out to other Vanguard patients. Not openly. I didn't want to tip my hand. But through those online forums, through support groups, I made connections. I found 37 people who'd had similar experiences, denied claims, retroactive cancellations, medical bankruptcies. I asked each of them the same question. Would you be willing to share your story publicly if you knew it could make a difference? 31 said yes. While I was doing this, I kept showing up for treatment. Dr. Patel had quietly worked out an arrangement with the hospital. They'd continue my chemo if I paid a reduced rate, $5,000 per session instead of 12. It was still bleeding us dry, but it bought time. Lauren went back to work full-time. We sold my car. We stopped eating out, canceled subscriptions, cut every possible expense. Emma started babysitting to help with groceries. 13 years old, and my daughter was working to help keep me alive. That's what Vanguard's cost containment had reduced us to. But I couldn't think about that. Not yet. because anger without direction is just noise. I needed to be surgical. I reached out to journalists, local news stations first, then regional papers, then national outlets. Most didn't respond. A few sent polite, thanks but no thanks emails. One reporter from the Portland Tribune was interested but said without hard evidence of wrongdoing, it was just another insurance company denies claim story. It happened every day. I needed something bigger, and something that would force people to pay attention. That's when I remembered something Patricia Reeves had mentioned: shareholder meetings. Vanguard held quarterly meetings where investors could ask questions directly to leadership. They were usually sleepy affairs, rubber stamp approvals of whatever management proposed. But they were public, and they were recorded. The next meeting was in 6 weeks. I bought a single share of Vanguard stock for $43. It made me a shareholder, which meant I had the right to attend and the right to speak. In the meantime, I started building something else, a website. I called it Vanguard Truth. Simple design, clean layout, just the facts. My story, documented with every piece of evidence I'd collected. The stories of the 31 other patients who'd agreed to go public. Copies of denial letters with names redacted. Screenshots of Vanguard's own policy documents highlighting the contradictions. And I created a database, a searchable list of every Vanguard claims adjuster, supervisor, and executive I could identify. Not their home addresses or anything that could be considered doxing, just their names, titles, and professional contact information. The people making these decisions deserved to have their names attached to them. I didn't launch the site yet. I was waiting for the right moment. The shareholder meeting was held in Phoenix at Vanguard's headquarters. I flew out the night before, even though I could barely walk without getting winded. Lauren wanted to come with me, but we couldn't afford 2 tickets, so I went alone. The meeting room was exactly what you'd expect. Corporate sterile. On 200 shareholders, most of them institutional investors or proxies. Richard Hastings stood at the podium looking like every CEO in every shareholder meeting ever. Expensive suit, perfect hair, smile that didn't reach his eyes. He went through the presentation. Record profits, stock performance, market expansion. Everyone nodded along. A few softball questions about dividends and growth strategy. Then they opened the floor to general questions. I stood up. My hand was shaking, but I kept my voice steady. Mr. Hastings, my name is David Brennan. I'm a Vanguard policyholder. Or I was, until 3 months ago when your company denied my cancer treatment coverage based on a pre-existing condition I didn't have. I'd like to know, what percentage of Vanguard's record profits come from denying legitimate medical claims? The room went dead quiet. Hastings' smile didn't falter, but I saw his jaw tighten. Mr. Brennan, I'm sorry to hear about your situation, but this forum isn't appropriate for individual claims discussions. I'd encourage you to work with our appeals department. I tried that. They told me I had a 4% chance of success. What I'm asking is a business question. Does Vanguard factor claims denials into its profit model? A few people shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. Hastings glanced at the company lawyer sitting to his left. Our medical review process is rigorous and based on policy terms that are clearly disclosed to all members. And we don't deny legitimate claims. Then how do you explain a 38% denial rate when the industry average is 18%? Now I had his attention. The smile was completely gone. I don't know where you're getting those numbers, but they're inaccurate. We're committed to providing quality care to all our members within the terms of their policies. What about the cost containment division, the department specifically tasked with identifying high-cost patients to deny? Is that commitment to quality care? The lawyer leaned over and whispered something to Hastings. Security was starting to move toward the aisles. Sir, I think we need to move on to other questions. If you'd like to discuss your individual case, please contact our member services department. I don't want to discuss my case. I want to know if you can sleep at night knowing your profit margins are built on letting people die. That's when security reached me. Two men in suits, polite but firm. I let them escort me out. I'd said what I needed to say, and more importantly, I'd done it on camera. The meeting was being live-streamed to investors. I walked out of that building and sat in my rental car for 20 minutes, hands shaking, heart racing. Then I opened my laptop and launched the Vanguard Truth website. Within 6 hours, it had 50,000 visits. The website went viral in a way I never expected. Not because of anything I did. I didn't promote it, didn't post it on social media. But the shareholders who'd been at that meeting started talking. Someone recorded my question and answer exchange and posted it on Twitter. Then Reddit picked it up. And then the news stations I'd contacted months earlier suddenly wanted to talk. Within 72 hours, Vanguard Truth had been viewed by over 2 million people. The stories were what did it. Not my story alone, though people were angry about that, but the pattern. 31 other patients, all with the same experience. Denied coverage for arbitrary reasons. Bankrupted by medical bills. Some who died waiting for appeals to process. One woman, Jennifer Mathis, had lost her husband to a treatable form of leukemia because Vanguard denied his stem cell transplant, claiming it was experimental despite FDA approval. She'd uploaded their entire email exchange with claims adjusters, including one message where a supervisor wrote, "Further treatment unlikely to provide meaningful extension of life expectancy. Our recommend denial." Recommend denial. As if her husband was a line item on a budget spreadsheet. The media caught fire. Local news became national news. CNN ran a segment. The New York Times published an investigation into Vanguard's claims practices. Congressional staffers started asking questions. But what really changed things was the employees. Current and former Vanguard workers started coming forward anonymously, confirming everything Patricia Reeves had told me. The denial quotas, the algorithmic targeting, the executive bonuses tied to cost containment metrics. One email, leaked by a former IT contractor, showed Gregory Walsh congratulating his team for exceeding denial targets by 17% year over year. He'd sent it from his company email. In writing, Vanguard's stock dropped 12% in a week. Richard Hastings issued a statement calling the website a coordinated disinformation campaign by disgruntled former customers. He claimed my story was fabricated, that I was working with competitors to damage Vanguard's reputation. So I did something I'd been holding in reserve. I released my complete medical records, the denial letters, the phone call recordings, everything. Not redacted, not editorialized, just the raw evidence. A week later, 3 major law firms announced they were filing a class action lawsuit against Vanguard on behalf of denied policyholders. They estimated the class could include up to 70,000 people. Then the Department of Insurance for the state of New York opened an investigation. Then California. Then Texas. Vanguard tried to take down the website. They sent a cease and desist claiming I was violating HIPAA by publishing medical information. My lawyer, a healthcare law specialist who'd taken my case pro bono after seeing the news coverage, fired back a response that basically said, "You can't claim privacy violations for information about myself, and everything else on the site is either public record or voluntarily provided by other patients." The website stayed up. 2 weeks after the shareholder meeting, Gregory Walsh resigned. The press release said he was pursuing other opportunities. But according to sources inside Vanguard, he'd been fired. The board didn't want him anywhere near the company when the lawsuit started in earnest. Martin Chen, the CFO, followed 3 days later. Hastings held on longer. He went on CNBC and tried to spin it as an unfortunate situation that Vanguard was taking very seriously. He announced a top-to-bottom review of claims practices and promised that any legitimate denials would be reevaluated. But the damage was done. Major employers started dropping Vanguard from their insurance offerings. The company's credit rating was downgraded. That acquisition Hastings had been working on? The other company walked away. 37 days after I stood up at that shareholder meeting, Richard Hastings announced his resignation as CEO. 3 days after that, I got a phone call from Vanguard's new interim CEO, a woman named Elizabeth Torres, who'd been brought in from outside the company to clean up the mess. She apologized, personally, for 45 minutes. She said that after reviewing my file, it was clear the denial had been wrong. Vanguard would be reversing the decision, covering all past and future treatment, and reimbursing me for the out-of-pocket expenses I'd incurred. She also offered me a settlement, a substantial one, enough to cover what Lauren and I had lost, plus enough to ensure Emma's college would be paid for. There was one condition. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement and take down the Vanguard Truth website. I told her no. Not because I didn't want the money. We needed it desperately. But because the website was never about me. It was about the 70,000 other people in that class action lawsuit. The hundreds of thousands more who'd been denied and never fought back. The system that let companies profit from human suffering. Torres was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I didn't expect. I understand. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. She authorized payment anyway. No NDA, no conditions. The website stayed up. The class action lawsuit took 18 months to settle. Vanguard agreed to pay $2.8 billion to denied policyholders and implement sweeping reforms to their claims process. The algorithmic review system was scrapped. The cost containment division was dissolved. Every denial going forward would require sign-off from a licensed physician with no financial stake in the decision. It wasn't perfect. Money doesn't bring back the people who died waiting for appeals. It doesn't erase the trauma of choosing between bankruptcy and survival. But it was something. It was accountability. As for me, I finished treatment. The cancer went into remission 6 months ago. I still go in for scans every 3 months, and every time I sit in that waiting room, I think about how close I came to not being here. Not because of the disease, but because of a spreadsheet. Emma's in high school now. She wants to be a lawyer. Says she wants to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. I couldn't be prouder. Lauren and I rebuilt our savings. The settlement helped, but so did something else. I started consulting for other patients dealing with insurance denials, teaching them how to document everything, how to navigate the appeals process, how to find the leverage points in the system. I don't charge for it. It's just something I do because I can, and because too many people can't. The Vanguard Truth website is still up. It's evolved into a resource hub, patient stories, guides on fighting denials, a directory of lawyers who specialize in insurance litigation. It gets about 50,000 visitors a month. I still get emails from people thanking me for giving them hope. Some days, those emails are the only thing that makes the whole nightmare feel worth it. Richard Hastings never worked in healthcare again. Last I heard, he was teaching business ethics at a small college in Vermont. I don't know if that's ironic or poetic, but either way, it's not my problem anymore. Gregory Walsh filed for bankruptcy 9 months after he was fired. The gambling debts finally caught up to him. Martin Chen took a job at a pharmaceutical company. Lower profile, lower salary. Probably sleeps better at night. Patricia Reeves, the whistleblower who helped me understand how the system worked, she started a nonprofit that advocates for insurance reform. We're friends now. She says people like us have a responsibility to keep telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Here's what I learned. The system doesn't change because it wants to. It changes because people force it to. And the only way to force it is to stop being afraid. Stop being quiet. Stop accepting that this is just how things are. Vanguard didn't cancel my insurance because they were evil. They did it because they could. Because they'd calculated the risk and decided I'd either die, go bankrupt, or give up before I could hurt them. They were wrong about me, but they've been right about thousands of others. That's what haunts me, not what happened to me. I survived. But all the people who didn't have the energy or resources or luck to fight back, who died quietly while Vanguard posted record profits. I think about that a lot. About how many David Brennans are out there right now, holding denial letters, trying to figure out how to pay for treatment, wondering if they should just give up. And I want them to know, you're not alone. You're not crazy. The system is broken, but it's not unbeatable. Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to disappear. I was hooked up to an IV when I decided I wasn't going to let them win. Sitting in that chair, watching the poison drip into my veins, making a choice. I could accept what they were telling me, or I could fight like my life depended on it. Because it did. And now, I'm sitting here on the other side of it all, cancer-free, financially stable, watching my daughter grow up. I know I made the right choice. Not because I won, but because I refused to lose quietly. That's the thing about revenge. Real revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about refusing to let them destroy you. It's about taking the thing they tried to use against you, your vulnerability, your fear, your desperation, and turning it into something they can't ignore. Vanguard tried to make me disappear. Instead, I made sure everyone could see exactly who they were, and that, in the end, was the only revenge that mattered.